Hello everybody. I was just waiting for my mic to be turned on. Good afternoon. My name is Naomi Smith. I am Chief Operating Officer at Best for Britain. I'm co-host of the Romaniacs podcast, and a very, very long time ago, I was involved in youth and student politics. So I'm absolutely delighted, therefore, to be joined by the political leading lights of their generation on this panel this afternoon. We have Osaro Otobo, she's president of Hull University. We've got Emily Chapman, Vice President of the NUS, and both of them are supporters of For Our Future's Sake. We have one of the co-founders of For Our Future's Sake, Jason Arthur, with us. He's also a former Labour councillor. And all the way from Northern Ireland, we are very, very pleased to welcome Doire Finn, who helps to run Our Future, Our Choice in Northern Ireland. And so thank you, Jason, for providing some much-needed gender balance on this panel today. So they're going to be telling us about what they think about our society and how broken or not they think it is, and what the remedies are for that. And whether or not another referendum is likely to exacerbate or help heal those wounds. But before we begin, I'd really like to take your pulse on all of this and hear from you about what you think. We've seen yellow vest rioters in the streets. We've had Jeremy Hunt warning that if we overturn Brexit, there will be riots in the streets. We've had fascist demos. We've had, of course, our own very, very peaceful 700,000 strong demos. So could you just put your hands up if you think that our society is broken at the moment? Give me a show of hands if you believe in that statement. So that's, I think that's 2/3 of the room at least. And then my second question to you, that I'm probably going to ask you at the end again, but how many of you have hope for the UK in being less divided in the future? Hands up. So, okay, so that's relatively similar, maybe slightly fewer. Well, I'm very hopeful that by the end of this session, every hand is going to be in the air because our panel are that generation that are going to deliver that hope for us, and I think are part of exactly the right kinds of voices we need to hear as we stop Brexit and heal our country. So I'm going to give them all 5 minutes each and leave plenty of time for Q&A from you all, as I'm sure you'll be very keen to ask them lots of questions. So, Osaro, I'm going to start with you. Your view from a northern city like Hull, are we divided? Can another referendum hurt or heal that?
Well, I've been living in Hull for the past 6 years, so I went to university at the age of 18, just turned 24 this week. Very proud to be from the UK City of Culture. But I'm also from London as well. I'm a young black woman. I'm a young person, and so I feel like I have a range of different perspectives and different viewpoints that will be very helpful in this conversation. I do feel a lot of people feel there is a divide at the moment, and it can be seen in lots of different aspects, which I'll tell you about in a minute. Being a president of a student union, you may think that I have always been very passionate about politics, but that hasn't been the case. I've never really been involved in anything like this before, and I think that really shows how many young people now are so passionate about their futures. They're worried about what will happen, and we actually want to do something about it, and so that's why I've got involved with a group like For Our Future's Sake to campaign on those issues. And I feel like the People's Vote campaign has really pushed young people at the forefront, and I feel that we are working together, both young and old, to make sure that we can work towards a common goal, and that's one thing that I'm really passionate about with this campaign. Being a young person living in Hull, I know that many people voted Leave for very legitimate reasons, and I do believe we always have to remember and respect that fact. I have friends and family that voted Leave. One of my parents did, and I wasn't very happy at the time, but I also had to respect their view. And a place like Hull, a place that depends very heavily on the European Union for trade and transport, it voted to leave. And we need to look at communities like that and ask them why. Why have they felt like they needed to vote leave when they depend so heavily on the EU? And a lot of people voted leave as a sign for hope for a better time, a better future, because they've been so unhappy with the government. And moving forward, I think for us to move forward as a country, we need to talk to communities like that, not ignore them, not talk at them, ask them why, ask them what they want to change, and work together to make that happen. As a black woman, I grew up in a diverse community in East London. One very disappointing thing for me with the Brexit is the link between hate crimes rising. And I do think it is always important to not paint everyone with the same brush. Even though it may have unleashed some rises in hate crimes, not everyone that voted leave are that sort of people. In whole, hate crime doubled the week after the June referendum. I actually was one of the BME people that experienced that, and that wasn't great. We see a lot of stuff happening in the media around that as well. But as a diverse community, a young community, both young and old, I do believe that no matter what backgrounds we come from, we do need to work together to make a change, or else it won't happen. And I do believe that is something that the People's Vote is doing well. And if you look at the Leave Means Leave side, I don't think they have that figured out yet. I think that's what will bring us together. So finally, I do believe that many things have changed from 2016. The world is a very different place. Many people voted leave as a hope of a better life, but they've realized that it might not be what they thought it will be. We have a proposed deal. We can see what is being offered to the people. I believe that giving people a chance to decide for themselves whether they are happy with the deal is the right thing to do. I don't believe it will cause more division. I don't believe it undermines democracy. I believe that a People's Vote is the only way we can move forward, and changing the face of UK politics, making it work for those communities that have felt cast aside is critically important. And we can only do that by coming together, and we have to act now.
Thank you very much, Osaro, and I'm terribly sorry to hear that you were the victim of a hate crime, and I think it's all the more honourable of you to want to reach out and heal that divide and recognise it, having suffered like that. Next up, we're going to hear from Emily, Vice President of the NUS. So you've got this sort of national view of what students are thinking and doing and saying.
Yeah,
What's your view?
So in my day job, as I say, I represent further education students, but I represent over 7 million students and apprentices across the UK. So most of the time I do call my office a train, which I absolutely love because I get to travel across all the UK hearing different views. And the thing that I was really passionate about speaking about in this panel was, are we broken as a country? And I think the first thing I can definitely say from my personal experience and what I wanted to share is I think there is a divide. And I felt that when I was very honoured to speak at the launch of a Women's for a People's Vote campaign back in September. I was very honoured to do that, but unfortunately after I did it, after I put all my stuff on my Twitter because I took all my selfies, it was an amazing day, I was subject to a lot of misogyny and bullying over social media, basically commenting on my appearance, because they basically wanted me to shut up because they didn't like what I was saying. And I'm going to say something, I'm not going to shut up no matter how much bullying happens to me. And I think it's safe to say we've seen this week that is dividing our country, and it doesn't need to. And I think there's other things that have led to it. I think the M25 corridor divide is now more highlighted than ever, and I've lived on the other side of that corridor as well, so I feel quite passionate about that. But the other thing is, and Osaro just mentioned it, families are being divided. And there's no reason for this to be divided. We had a vote 2 years ago, and everyone voted for their reasons. Some of them were grievances. Some of them were grievances not against the EU. They were actually against our own systems in the UK. But I think the one thing whichever way we voted, the one thing that we can definitely agree on here today is our government is in deadlock. And I don't think they can decide on a people's vote. I think it's these people in this room and across the country that can decide, and that's why we need to have the people's vote. And the one thing I'm really passionate about is further education, young people's voices, and that's what I do day to day. And I asked them one question, and it was, did we see this? Did we see where we were when we voted 2 years ago? Is this what we wanted to see? And all the time they tell me they want to be listened to. They don't want to be used as a tokenistic manifesto pledge or a point-scoring exercise. That's not what young people are here for. They want their voices heard, and they deserve the right to hear their voices heard. So for me, young people have been leading the way in this campaign for our future's sake, through the People's Vote campaign. They were at the front of the march back in October, and we can come together and win for this people's vote, because while the rise in fascists and thugs are going to go up, they're going to take their low blows. We need to stand firm, and we need to look up and take the higher ground rather than the lower ground, because that way we can stand high and stand together for democracy, and through democracy we will win a people's vote.
Jason, you've been at the forefront of leading young voices around the country for quite some time now. What's your view on how broken we are or not?
So I think we absolutely are divided, and to be honest, I think another referendum would be divisive. I think to say that it wouldn't, in my view, is a little churlish, because ultimately the strength of feeling about Brexit probably surpasses any other issue in politics. More people identify as being a Remainer or a Leaver than they do identifying as being a Labour voter or a Tory voter or any other party. So we clearly feel very passionately about it. My view is, first of all, we have to look at all of the options on the table. So when I hear people like Jacob Rees-Mogg or Boris Johnson come out and say, oh, well, another referendum will be divisive, and at the same time then advocate for a policy that would see our economy shrink by 10%, that would see us struggle to get medicine and food into our country, it's difficult to take them seriously when they say that. Likewise with Theresa May's deal, you can't say with any conviction that you're going to bring the country together when it would inevitably lead to years of negotiation, because nothing is resolved by her proposals, and would also see our economy shrink too. To me, Brexit is very much a project of the political far right, which looks to exploit people's legitimate grievances, and in doing so provide very simplistic answers to address them. But there is no intention by those who are driving it to unite the country, and we should oppose it with every ounce of our being. But we also have to take a very hard and strong look at ourselves, and this is where I'll echo some of the messages that Caroline and others have said over the course of today. So why did we get to where we are? Well, we've got to where we are because for 20, 30 years, we have had a political establishment and an economic orthodoxy which has alienated and neglected huge swathes of our society. We have a Westminster elite that feels out of touch, a European elite that feels out of touch. We've got an economy that is largely based on housing and financial services, lack of investment in infrastructure outside of the southeast. So inevitably, people feel furious about that, and so when the simplistic answer of taking back control by escaping the clutches of Europe or stopping more immigrants from coming in was offered, understandably people wanted to grab onto something that felt like change. And so there was a lot of uproar, I guess, in more middle-class circles or more educated circles, perhaps, when Michael Gove came out and said, oh, well, we don't want to hear any more from experts. People have had enough about experts. But actually, for 30 years, experts have said, this is how politics has to work. This is how the economic system has to work. And it had failed so many people. So we have to be laser-like in our analysis of that. We also have to be laser-like in our analysis of why we failed as a movement to get people on board with Remain. One, I think it's very clear that in terms of the leadership of that campaign, David Cameron, George Osborne very much wanted to push that. It's risky. It's a risky thing for us to leave. But actually, the Leave campaign, for all of its flaws, for all of its lies, for all of its misrepresentations, for all of its fear-mongering and being scared of the Turks or any other immigrant for that matter, or being scared of the ECJ, at its root was still a positive message of hope. Vote, take back control, and things will be better. Not what we were doing, which was saying, well, we're stronger in because if we leave, we'll be weaker. But actually, if you're in a community where you haven't seen investment and you can't get a job and someone says to you, oh, well, you'll be even worse, if you feel like you're at rock bottom, what does that mean to you? So we have to be much more hopeful and much more positive about the case that we make about our role in Europe and taking a leadership role in Europe. We have to be much more positive and hopeful about what change can come within our society, because Brexit makes all of the changes that we want to see much harder to make. It will divide our country, it will weaken our economy even more. But we also have to ensure that not only do we have a positive message, but that we also have the right message carriers. So what we can't have is just your typical MPs who are the ones leading the charge and making the case, because there is a level of alienation from them. We need to see more young people making the case, and that's why I feel very proud of what FFS and OFUC have been able to achieve, because what we've done is put a variety of diverse, articulate young people on stages in the media saying, this is why we believe Brexit is bad for our future. So we need to see more young people we need to see more young people on stages in the media making the case. We need to see more working class people making the case. We need to see more working class people of ethnic minority background making the case. So, personally, one of the challenges that I have had and still have is looking at that 700,000 march. It was brilliant to see so many people there, brilliant to see a lot more young people there. Didn't see, in my view, enough ethnic minorities here. I'm not seeing enough ethnic minorities in this room now. If we want to make the case, we have to make sure that we're reaching out. And then the I guess, more technical elements of how we make sure that we are getting that message across through social media in a way that the other side was able to exploit, I think we need to be much better at too. In terms of message carriers, I think not just more broadly ethnic minorities, but immigrants from the European Union who say why they're here, why they've come to our country, the value that they think they're bringing, the value that they take from it, I think is massively important too. So I'll finish by saying this. If we allow ourselves to talk to Leave voters in any way with an air of arrogance or being patronizing, if we don't recognize that we have some fundamental challenges in our country that requires all of us to think differently, if we're not able to put forward a message of hope, if we're not able to put message carriers from a diversity of different backgrounds, then the country will become more divided and we will lose. But if we learn from those mistakes, then I am confident that we can have a people's vote, that we can win it, and then we can reunite the country again.
Thanks, Jason. Before I bring Derry in, what I'm hearing so far from all of you is that your belief is that the country isn't necessarily broken, but it certainly is divided. And one thing that we've not really touched on yet is intergenerational division. And obviously there are young Leave voters as well as old Leave voters, but we do broadly know that there is some demographic split there. What's the message as a young person to older people that might have voted Leave?
For me, I think it's being very clear that as a young person, you will have to deal with the impact of Brexit, for better or for ill, longer than any other group. And I think it's having an honest conversation about what we as young people aspire to for the future, where we feel positive about Britain's role in the world, we feel positive about the impact of technology overall in helping to connect us, we feel positive about the role of immigrants within our society, but we also listen and learn from the experience of older people and say, actually, based on what you have seen, where have things become more challenging? And then try and find common ground to say, together, how can we learn from your experience and maximize the opportunities that we can see, but do that within Britain being part of the European Union. And I think if we can do that without saying what could be the case, which is to say, oh, well, we're young, so only listen to us and ignore I think that will put people's backs up. But we should also be saying, actually, we're going to have to deal with this the longest, so please do listen to us.
Thank you. And somebody who is no stranger to a divided society is our next speaker, and I think that is worth remembering that for many of us who have lived in a Westminster bubble or, an elitist bubble in the southeast of England, suddenly the fact that we feel that we now have this divided country feels very, very new. But of course, division has been very close to us for a very long time. And so I'm very, very pleased to introduce Doire, who has come all the way from Northern Ireland to speak to us today. Doire.
Thank you very much. I think when I heard the topic that I was going to be speaking about, and it was a divided society, it was something that, as you've said, is something that has been very, very close to home for everyone in Northern Ireland. We have travelled today from a part of the United Kingdom which has no government. It's now been 724 days where the divisions in Northern Ireland have left us with absolutely no representatives sitting in our devolved institution. To put that into any kind of respect, that's nearly 18,000 hours that our elected representatives have not sat and discussed Brexit, discussed the impacts that it's going to have, spoken about any issue that is close to the hearts of young people. And I think, when you combine that with the fact that we have 10 DUP MPs who are sitting in Westminster, and as Tara mentioned earlier today, they aren't representing the views of young people who are living there, and they also aren't representing the views of a majority of all of our citizens. We then have 8 Sinn Féin MPs who don't take their seats, and we have one single independent MP. She's the only MP who is representative of the whole of Northern Ireland. And I think, you can see that as a massively negative thing, but I think it makes people in Northern Ireland particularly resilient. And as much as I do think we are a divided society, I don't think that we're unfixable. I think in Northern Ireland, I've seen the work that Our Future, Our Choice have done. Comparatively to 20 years ago, we wouldn't be where we are today. It just wouldn't happen. And I think in the darkest of times, we have to look and say, everybody is a human being. Everybody has the same base requirements, and we all need to band together. I think Brexit has been one of the most divisive, if not the most divisive issues of my generation. And, talking about intergenerational divides, I don't think that's right. I think we as a society have got to a point where we all need to say we want what is best for every single person living within the United Kingdom, and be that a people's vote, which I personally believe that it is. I think we all need to stand up and say we have had enough of being divided by Westminster, we have had enough of being underrepresented by our politicians, and quite frankly, we are going to stand up united against Brexit to ensure that every single person's future in the United Kingdom is protected.
Thank you very, very much, Doire. Okay, so I'm sure lots of you have got questions that you'd like to ask. I've been told that you're being very, very well behaved today and actually asking questions and not making long set speeches from the floor. So I will cut anybody off who decides that we need a few of those today. I'm going to take them in batches of 3, and I'll try and make my way around the room. So there's a lady in a lovely blue jumper with her hand up about 6 rows back there. and this gentleman on the end of this middle row afterwards, and then I'll take somebody from this side of the room. Okay, seeing as you're waving very gleefully at me, I'll take the chap on the front.
Hiya, thanks very much to everyone. I hear a lot about how young people voted against Brexit and how old people, like over 45, let down. Yeah, that's us. Totally let down the side. This is not what I have personally seen, and I wondered what ideas you have to galvanise the youth. When I said to the youngsters downstairs, half a dozen times that I was going on a march, they went, oh, yeah, we're going to a gig. They were all at Glastonbury for the referendum. Anyway, to shut up, how would you galvanise the youth in whose interest it is, but who don't necessarily quite make it to the voting booths? Thank you.
Thank you, great question. And then, is there a second mic? Yeah. There was a woman in the you were the third person. Who was the second? There was a chap. Okay, all right, okay, fine, great. So will somebody else get their hands up ready for the third one? Hi.
Traditionally, when you do any kind of decision making on investment or whatever, you throw away all the sunken costs, everything that happened in the past. You don't say who's guilty, you don't say who's to blame. The only thing that you say is, how do I get out of the shit? So why don't we talk exclusively about the future? Why don't we compete against the unicorn or the Holy Grail or whatever, which was talking about a rosy future without talking about the past? The past was implicit. The fact that everything that brought people to vote for Brexit looks like the film The Producers. Everybody thought that they were voting to protest. And eventually they won. And that happened with Trump, and that happened with Brexit, and will continue to happen if you have one side talking about the past and the other side talking about the future. So we need to talk just about the future and how do we get out of the shit. And this is what Lara and Femi are doing, so can we do more of that, please?
Thank you very much. Okay, there's a chap in the middle at the back of this. Yeah, thank you.
Can I ask the panel to deal with one of the criticisms of having a second referendum, which is that if two, why not three, why not four? The never-endum argument. And to compare it with the reality of a number of European countries which did have two referendums, or Quebec, which had two referendums about breaking away from the rest of Canada. And what was very strange with these other international examples was after that second referendum, there was calm, whatever people had said beforehand. The panel's comments would be very helpful.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to come last to the first question, I think, about ideas to galvanise young people, because I think that's probably the easiest one for us all to answer. So I'm going to start with Emily. Can we campaign solely talking about the future, or do we have to look a little bit back to the things that have gone on before?
I think in a situation that we're in at the moment, it's very hard not to look at the past, given how people feel and how people potentially have been burnt. So sometimes, yeah, it might be different. I sometimes think we can, because there are good things that have happened in the past, and it's a very fine balance. And I'm not sure is the honest answer to my question, given that, for me personally, how much I've been burnt in the past, especially with what's happened since then. Because sometimes when you get burnt, those wounds are very hard to heal. And I'm going to be honest when I say that.
Derry, can we just have a message of hope and nothing else?
I think currently now a message of hope is exactly what everybody needs. I think in terms of looking to the future, that is the most idealistic option, and obviously the one that every single person wants, that we look towards a brighter and more positive future. I think really in that case, you need to accept what happened. We did vote to leave the European Union, and it has been something that happened. But when you look at it, the promises that were made aren't being delivered on. You know, people who voted for Brexit aren't getting what they wanted. People who voted to remain aren't getting what they wanted. And I think we need to look to the future to say, you know, very much like the Good Friday Agreement, there was a copy of that agreement sent to every single home in Northern Ireland, and people were allowed to read it, decide if that was what they wanted for their future, and then vote on it. And I think that that has to happen. So looking towards the future, I think, is the best thing to do to make sure that we can ensure a people's vote and a proper future for everyone here.
Thank you. Jason, I'm going to ask you to answer the question about the Referendum and how do we counter those attacks that, oh, well, if you want a second one, or is it really a third, if you remember 1975, which no one in this panel does, including me. Yeah, what's your best stock response to that?
So I think there is a practical response and a principle response. So I think the practical response is we have deadlock within the Commons. Clearly, Theresa May's deal, looks like it's going to be voted down. There's no majority for a no deal. There's no majority, I don't think, for a no Norway Plus option. That's even assuming that the Norwegians or EFTA would even want us in that, or a Canada Plus or whatever it might be. So if there is deadlock within Parliament, within Commons, then I would argue going back to the people is the only way to break it. A general election is and should be about a variety of different things. So I don't think that is the best way to break it. I think it has to be done through a vote. I think the principal reason why it's legitimate and to argue against referendums is democracy didn't end on June the 23rd, 2016. People should have the right. People should absolutely have the right to change their minds. People should absolutely have the right, now that we have more information, to be able to take an informed decision. And what I find deeply frustrating is that it was Brexiteers who were making that argument when they thought it was beneficial for them. So the amount of papers that Dominic Cummings wrote saying, oh, we should have a confirmatory referendum. Likewise, Jacob Rees-Mogg said it in 2011. So the hypocrisy of these people who were saying, no, it's only one and should only be one, when they were saying when it was convenient that it should be two, should be always exposed as well.
Great. Does that answer your question? So, Osaro, we know that young people don't turn out to vote in the same numbers that older people do, and the lure of Glastonbury is a lot more fun and exciting than pounding the streets like some kind of sado like me in pouring rain on referendum day. How next time round are we going to get to those young people and say, this is about your future and you've got to help us out this time?
The first thing I will say is that you need to talk to young people, ask them what they want, ask them what they're passionate about. I think that's not what we did last time around. I don't think we did enough of it. And when I say young people, I don't just mean young people that have been to university. I mean all young people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, all races. Every single type of young person needs to feel like their voice is being heard and elevated. Giving young people like me the opportunity to talk on stage, this is amazing. I've never done anything like this before. I feel... Just giving young people the power, empowering them to feel like their voices are heard and they are valued. I think that's the first thing, talking to them. Also, I think working with groups like For Our Future's Sake and Our Future, Our Choice, look at what they're doing, look at the sort of ways that they're communicating to students. They're doing fun things that will engage people, doing rallies, talking to celebrities that young people are interested in, and they're talking about issues in a way that is easy to understand. I feel like in the past, young people may have felt, oh, this is way too complicated to understand. I don't really know what I can do. I don't really understand how this can affect me. I think breaking it down into a language that everyone can understand is the way that we can move forward and help young people realize that they are the future. And then without them, nothing can change.
Thank you very much. I don't think it would be fair for me to not also throw that question open to the rest of the panel. If any of you have got any other suggestions on getting to young people.
From my point of view, I can't argue that. She said everything that's said. We've got young people, you've got students in low economic backgrounds, you've got the apprentices, you've got students in colleges, and from a Vice President of Further Education point of view, when I go and see him, they sometimes shut me up. they really do know and want to have a say on things, so seriously listen to them, because they do know what they want, and it's not just a tick box exercise. They want to have their voices heard.
Okay, we've got time for one more round of questions, I think. Okay, I've got 3 women with their hands up, so I'm going to go to them. I've got more than that, but I can see 3. So there's a lady there, yeah, and then I'll come to the lady in the People's Vote t-shirt, and then the lady in the beret. Yeah. So, yeah, it's the lady which you've got black blazer, white, yeah.
Hi there, thank you.
Hi.
I am really pleased to hear you talking about more young involvement and also pointing out that this audience is quite a white audience. And one of the things I was talking about with Sim, who spoke earlier this morning, and who's a British Asian, is that one of the most disappointing things I came across when campaigning around a referendum was just the extent to which first and second generation immigrants don't like immigrants. And out of all my British Indian and British Pakistani and British Persian and, as they call themselves, British Arab friends, all of their families, without exception, voted Brexit. Do we have enough time to change that, and if so, how? Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Hello, yeah, I was, tried to get people to remain and everything. What my daughter tells me is, Mum, you can't talk to youngsters on Facebook, you can't talk to them on Twitter, they're not on any of those. So how do we speak to young people?
Thank you, very good question. And then the lady in the beret at the front, thank you.
Yes, I also want to mention something that was on Channel 4 last night about Jon Snow chairing this meeting with students. Most of them were leavers, and they were young people. But there were 2 ladies who I think may have been Remainers, but they were never given a chance to talk. It seems whenever one of them tried to talk, they were being shut up by one of the leavers, who was very, very dominant. And Jon Snow just let it happen. So it just seems that women weren't allowed to say anything. So how, and it seems also that Brexit seems to be dominated by middle-aged, white-haired men.
Okay.
So how can we get over that?
Question. Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, just ever so quickly on the point about what we're seeing in terms of the voters from ethnic minority backgrounds. The research that we've done with Hope Not Hate, the anti-fascism organisation, and Best for Britain, shows that some of the biggest shifts towards Remain since the referendum have come from both the Muslim and Hindu communities. So there is some good news out there. But I will now throw this question over to Osaro. How are we going to get more black and minority ethnic voices to understand that, this is where they need to be? They need to be advocating Remain and staying in the EU and not kicking back with a Leave vote.
I think one of the main problems is that the BAME community doesn't really see themselves being represented in politics. They don't really feel like it's for them. And I think one of the steps that we can do is making sure that we have voices like me on stage talking, not just a tokenistic thing, it has to be meaningful. And I think that will really get through to those communities. I think we also have to look at the past. I think I was born in this country and my parents came from Nigeria and they had a very hard time working to where they are now. And I think there may be some resentment in communities like that because of the tough time that they've had with the government. And that's why some people may have voted Leave for that hope. And I think what we need to do to move forward is ask them what have they been unhappy with, and then as a government we need to work on those policies that have impacted on those people. And I think if the community can see those changes being made, I think that's what we can do to move forward to go for a people's vote. But at the moment, I think some communities may have not had that important hope that they need.
Thank you. Jason?
So I think there are a few things. So one, and this is as a Labour Party member as well, a frustration I have on that front, is that there is a level of complacency sometimes to assume that, if you are an immigrant, you must clearly want to be against Brexit, an assumption that you would generally surely want to vote Remain, and I think that is wrong. And I think in 2016 it led to too little focus in courting ethnic minorities. I think how we court ethnic minorities to support Remain needs to be thoughtful. So, for example, if you look at some of the work done after the result, a lot of British Asian people from that community voted for Brexit because they felt a greater attachment to the Commonwealth than they did to the European Union. So if we then go and fly flags with the stars in front of them and say, look, feel that sense of identity, that might not connect with them as much as saying, look, some of the challenges that you face are the same as people who live in Hartlepool or in Hull. There are commonalities about the struggles across different communities that mean, actually, is Brexit going to harm us or is it going to help us? And if it's a more thoughtful approach than a complacent one, then I think we might be able to make further inroads than we've seen.
Thank you. Derry, we know that Facebook is just full of middle-aged people these days. I think it's mums who are like the fastest growing group on Instagram. How the hell are we going to reach young people? Where are they hanging out?
I think in terms of reaching young people, the best way to do it is go out and speak to young people. I have travelled across Northern Ireland and gone into schools, and as much as students don't particularly on a Friday afternoon want to listen to why Brexit is such a horrible thing, I haven't stopped. It's not something that I'm not going to be like, no, I'm not going into school. But there is something about talking to someone face to face, and I think if we can get enough young people going out across the country and going into schools and saying to students who maybe don't understand or who haven't been politically motivated or are ill-informed about things, how do you feel, what are your fears? I think the best way to go about doing that is indefinitely to actually speak to their faces, see where they are, and make sure that they're having their voices heard.
Thank you. And finally, I'm going to give Emily the chance to close us and answering that question about plurality of voices, but particularly women getting sort of drowned out in a lot of this debate, particularly by the Leave side talking over them. What can we do to counteract that?
I think the best way that I would say it is don't stop, is keep going on how we're speaking. But there are groups like the Women's for People's Vote. And the other thing that I was going to say in answer to speaking to young people is there's groups up and down this country that organise events regionally. So you've got, I know, Leeds for Europe. You've got loads of different places all over the country. Get in contact with them. Get in contact with these organisations that are here to try and promote you. And if you're worried about what you want to say, literally, there is nobody who's in an organisation that probably doesn't agree with you. And I mean, I have anxiety disorder and things like this terrify me, but I'm passionate about what I say, and that's why I'd say contact people and don't be scared to use your voice, because there's no wrong answer here. You've got your belief, you should have the right to share it, and you shouldn't be talked down about it. So contact your groups, contact people, contact For Our Future's sake, contact the People's Vote campaign. They can put you in contact with the people that can help you express those voices.
Thank you very much. Okay, before we give our panel a rip-roaring round of applause, please could I just ask you to raise your hands and let me know if, having heard from all of them, you have a little bit more hope about how we're going to heal our divided country. Please raise your hands. I want every hand. Come on, there are definitely more. Okay, definitely more. Thank you all very, very much. Please give it up for my panel.